little times of trouble. Little times of trouble. Very often they can turn into big, unresolved family issues. How to deal with them? Or what should my attitude be when they have already happened?
The lesson mentions the mother-in-law. And I think that this is good enough for everyone to get what the lesson is about. La familia is a serious thing. And if there is no arguing, actually, something is probably not right.
Have you ever engaged in a conflict with your spouse? Funny question, isn't it? Or probably you have engaged in a conflict with your daughter or your son. Why? Why do we do that? The answer is very simple. It's in our blood. It's in our genes. We cannot stop ourselves. And if it hasn't happened with you, it will happen somewhere in the future. And probably, actually, this is not the right question to ask, why is this happening? The question should be asking is like, how to mollify, how to manage, how to soften a conflict like this when it happens. Those moments of argument will come. The question is, how do I react to them? What is my direction of response when provoked with words or actions? And I've learned from experience that usually there are two scenarios. We either want our ego to dominate the other person's standpoint, or we always look forward, long term. We want to have and to build a respectful and peaceful relationship. And regardless of which scenario we choose, we either take the argument and slowly cushion it down and put down the fire in the argument, or the argument grows into a conflict, and the conflict transforms into an unpleasant relationship.
The topic for this week is very sensitive and serious. I'm afraid that we'll be all hypocrites talking about it, because it's not easy to see our own faults, nor to admit them, nor to talk about them. It's much easier to blame the others in the family. Some of the advices from the Bible that the lesson starts with when talking about conflicts are to first remove the plank in our own eye. Also to be able to overlook the transgression from the others. And to be slow to anger and to try to stop the conflict before it develops and the argument and the leak becomes so big that it's impossible to stop. Admitting our own responsibility in a conflict will determine the tone and the direction. The lesson then becomes very practical when suggesting that when a problem needs to be discussed, to try to stay focused on the topic and not to mix it with anger or past issues. And also to make sure that the other side understands our best intention. And to affirm our relationship. And never follow it with "but." I have to admit that I laughed at that for a while, because it's so true. We like to say something positive and then say, but it ruins everything. Of course, also to listen and to really try to understand the other side and point. The lesson then tries to look specifically at marriage.
It's hard to admit it, but very often we forget that when we got married, we got into a relationship with an imperfect person. And because we love this person, it's hard to admit that he or she isn't flawless, but we have to. There is nothing wrong in doing that, because only then, when we see the person for who he or she is, for who they are, we can forgive them. Because without forgiveness, there is no real relationship in this fallen world. And then, when we see for who they are, it helps us to humble our ego down. It helps us to realize who we are. And then, we see ourselves as an imperfect sinner who needs forgiveness too. And our Lord, Jesus Christ, was the perfect example, who humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross.
To be able to forgive when your spouse doesn't deserve it. This is very strong from the lesson. It's not about deserving. We are all damaged by sin and we all have tons of issues. Marriage is how we deal with them together. Now, a very uncomfortable question. Do we have family members that we don't talk to?
We are deep, emotional creatures, and our feelings can be inspired by love, but they can also be fired up, and they can explode due to the harmful intentions of other people, and then we become angry. What does the Bible say? Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down in your wrath. Sometimes we, and I'm one of those people, we try to justify anger because we have good intentions and motivation behind what's happening. But the Bible says and teaches that the wrath of man is not capable of producing the righteousness of God, according to James 1:20.
Anger and refusal to forgive, this is real poison that kills relationships.
And we spoke of anger and we spoke of conflict. Now, let's combine those two together and we have the perfect environment for abuse. Physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual, domestic, etc. The Bible has its answer, and it says, "Beloved, let us love one another because God is love. He who does not love does not know God." There is not even a drop of love in an abusive behavior. Even more, I would say that abuse and love are two absolute opposites. So, those of us who follow Christ should love like Christ did, don't we? So how come sometimes we allow ourselves to speak or act in an abusive manner? We better not to.
There is no excuse for abuse, period. Often, victims of abuse are made to believe that it's their fault, that somehow they are provoking and deserving the abuse. It's a terrible manipulation. I like this quote from the lesson. A healthy relationship is one in which both partners feel safe and protected, in which anger is managed in a healthy way, and in which serving one another is the norm. Treat the others as you want them to treat you. This is what the law and the prophets are all about. This is what Jesus said. It's amazing how much we may pretend to understand faith, Christianity, spirituality, and yet how much we struggle to even grasp what love, forgiveness, peace are. We need a lot of help and grace.
Little times of trouble, if they're managed well and with the help of God's grace and God's wisdom, they will remain little times of trouble. So join us next week for our lesson, Families of Faith.